Hey guys, it's GreenLineGirl07, and today we are going to review Final Fantasy VII Remake. Not gonna lie, this was the one game I was looking forward to all year. I mean, Dreams was a nice surprise, but this one I had pre-ordered almost before it could be pre-ordered. And overall, I am very happy with how it turned out. I mean, this is a cutscene and it has so much detail, and obviously we haven't even touched this area in the remake. But, and overall, visually it is beautiful. I did find one area in which there was a lighting issue, and it was very later on in the game. And when I say lighting issue, I mean, alright, you had two characters that were not shaded in one scene, and then in the next they were. And in that same scene, you had characters that were shaded. Character design was Square did a very, very good job in making them look lifelike, and I cannot get over some of the detail they done. It really does feel like they did update the characters from the original game. And they did expand on the backstories and include characters from the compilation of Final Fantasy VII. The dialogue, I give a 7 out of 10 because sometimes it does feel kind of odd, and Barrett does get a little bit preachy about the plan early on. Although it was in the original too, so I can't really downplay that. Can't really say too much about it. And the voice actor doing Barrett, he did a wonderful job of conveying the character, and just gave so much more power to the words. Cloud, I have mixed feelings about. I do prefer Steve Burton, the voice actor who has portrayed Cloud in almost every other appearance, or the English voice actor that played every other appearance, over the current one. However, I don't think he done a bad job. I mean, most of the voices fit the characters. I do think, only one I really have an issue with is Aerith. I do feel like she feels cheerfully flat. I mean, for the most part. What I mean is, it's like the character cannot be sad. Even if, the worst of the worst happens, she cannot get mad. She cannot be sad. There's always a cheerfulness in her voice. I mean, and I don't know if that was how she was directed, or what was going on there. And I will say that Tifa probably goes through the widest range of most emotions. And we do get some odd mini games. I want to call this a mini game, even though it's not. It's supposed to be part of their security, but this is the only time we'll see it. I mean, I would kind of figure that at some point we would have seen it, maybe at another reactor. Because, you know, and something that Cloud does mention is that different reactors, depending on when they were built, have different layouts. It kind of makes sense they would have the same technology too, but apparently not. Now, the gameplay itself is very, I would call it almost as smooth as butter, because you can easily go from Sword, well, you can go from Barrett to Cloud to Tifa to Aerith, or whoever you have in your party. And of course, different enemies require, well, are better defeated, or more easily defeated by different characters. Now, I will say that some of Barrett's weapons do not include a gun unless you use this limit breaker. So try to keep that in mind before you move on story-wise in a big area in which you might need to defeat an enemy in the air. Especially if you're trying to get 100% proficiency in each weapon. It's actually something I'm working on now, but anyway, once you get the proficient in 100% proficiency, you can use the abilities of the weapon no matter which one you equip. So unlike the original, you can actually, as soon as you get a new weapon that's more powerful, you can actually, you don't sell it. You can actually just just swap out weapons, and you'll still have that ability. The only character I really had a problem with gameplay-wise is Aerith, because her character did feel kind of slow to me. I mean, she uses magic. That is her main weapon. But just using her regular attack, it was just kind of, I don't know how to describe that. It felt kind of cumbersome. I mean, and her words of beginning of a battle, when you swap to her, it felt more like, I don't know, something you would hear from Selphie from Final Fantasy VIII. And yes, I really hate to be picking on Aerith so much. Now, I will say that character-wise, like I said, all of these characters are beautifully done. They did expand on the backstories of the three members of Avalanche, and and we're kind of given hints to each of our main protagonists. Except for Aerith, we actually do get a, well, somewhat better fleshed out version of her backstory. I won't give away any details. And I'm going to go ahead and say that Barrett's backstory will probably come in part 2. Cloud's will at least partly come in part 2. Tifa will probably happen later. And let's see. Overall, they were fairly true to the original story. However, there were times when they did deviate from it, sometimes quite a bit. Obviously, they added padding, and one big element that they introduced early on that you did not get in the original was Sephiroth. And I realized that was kind of a game killer for some people. But I think how it was done and actually this was said in an interview, that they kind of treated him like Jaws. If you've ever played if you ever watched Jaws, they kind of hit the shark for most of the movie. And that actually works very, very well in horror movies. And especially in this, because unlike, well, if you've played the original, or even if you haven't, you already know who your main villain will be in the end. But how do you bring him into it when, well, for the most part, it did feel like Sephiroth in the first little bit of this game was more of a hallucination from post-traumatic stress. And, you know, we did have the addition of the Whispers, which you don't really find out the true name for until very, very late in the game. Oh yeah, and keep this tactic right here in mind because you will need it later. Maybe not immediately, but you'll need it later. Now, there was some combat on a motorcycle, and this was actually done, you actually got to do this twice. And overall, well, I found it more enjoyable the second time. And if the first time you do it, you also get a new rival that at a certain point you don't really see again. And I'm hoping he will appear in later installments. Now, as far as additional content goes, for the most part, where it was done, well, it was either done very well or or more cumbersome. Like it may have been an extra mini game or spending more time doing quests that, you know, maybe they could have waited or have not been as high priority. And especially when you had a big important mission to do. And at their best, it actually did feel like a natural part of the story and added to character development or added gameplay. I know one of the biggest things that they did change was wall market, and not in the way people were afraid they would. Because instead of a fetch quest where you find items, you actually complete, well, you complete quests and you actually have some combat. Well, quite a bit of combat anyway. Overall, and you know, there was a couple awkward mini games in that, but if you played, like, one of them I'm going to say was inspired by, was partly a tribute to a certain world in Kingdom Hearts 2. However, after that, it's fairly, well, however, aside from that, and the addition of some characters, it actually did feel mostly like the original story. And the places that you got the items in the original game, you know, they actually are there, and they look very good. If they gave an option where you could pick up those items there instead of do what you have to go through, they probably could have done that. I will say that one of the most cumbersome and odd mini games, if you can call it that, was actually in the sewer, and it also had a bit of awkward animation as well. I do think that one of my favorite chapters was the train graveyard. You know, and that one, you know, it was extra padding to a point. However, the story, you know, it did add a bit to the story, and it added a bit of urgency while also slowing you down. And while I won't give away all the changes, there were some that left me scratching my head, and some you could tell was supposed to be an Easter egg. I won't give away the ending, but I will say that it will shock you and it will leave you asking a lot of questions. And you will be reminded, Nomura does Kingdom Hearts. So overall, I would give this game probably an 8.5 out of 10. Now the only thing now does this now, that being said, I'm very, very excited for the part 2 whenever it comes out. I am going to try to keep my expectations low though, because I have been burned by sequels before. And until next time, guys, happy gaming!